Hello and welcome to the Sparks Tribune Report. My name is Devin Jones. You can find me on Twitter, and I'll include the link to where you can find me on Twitter and other various social media platforms, along with my website in the description box below. But my website, by the way, is sparkstribune.org. That's Sparks spelled with an X, tribune.org. And our headline today is that the disinformation campaign has begun already against the Bernie Sanders campaign, against the progressive movement writ large. Already prior to Bernie Sanders announcing his candidacy, Bernie Sanders has not announced his candidacy yet, albeit the New York Times, Politico, and New York Magazine have already began a disinformation campaign against the ideals and the progressive movement behind them. The New York Times writes an article entitled, and I quote, "For Bernie Sanders, holding on to support may be hard in a 2020 bid." The article, it feigns as though Sanders is losing support, even among progressives, the article claims. The article also points to other Congress people who are, of course, not as progressive. We speak of Warren, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, etc., etc., or appeal to ideas those on the right might appreciate, in the way that they might appreciate a Senator Sanders campaign, because Senator Sanders, his message tends to appeal across the board. When we're talking about, like, the Democratic Party establishment pretends or feigns as though they're attempting to garner voters, or we just want a candidate that is going to beat Trump. Regardless of policy, regardless of ideology, we just want a candidate that's going to beat Trump. Like, that's their number one priority. Regardless of their ideology, we don't care what is in the gray matter, what is in the head of the most powerful person in the nation, as long as they are not this particular person, as long as they're not Donald Trump. So, anthropocentric political ideology there, as though Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He's not, he's a symptom. But, when we talk of, third way and other centrist democratic establishment, organizations or ideologies for that matter, that's the ideology that's predominant, or that's the ideology that's protruded upon the American people, as though that's what we're supposed to accept. That they're at least supposed to make us feel as though anything is better than Donald Trump, and it doesn't matter what's in their heads. Well, that's only a cover, so that they can, they can put to the forefront a candidate that's corporate friendly. It's not that they don't care what is in that candidate's head. They most certainly do care what's in the candidate's head that they put forward. They just want us to not feel as though it matters too much, as long as it's not Donald Trump. It's a cover, it's a smokescreen, so that they can put forward a Beto O'Rourke, a Cory Booker, a Kamala Harris, etc., etc. At any rate, the article also puts the article also points to other Congress people who are, of course, not as progressive, um, and the ideas that Senator Sanders put forward that have appeal to other voters, and I'm going to use an argument for Senator Sanders that other people have used against him, because other people, in attacking Senator Sanders, in attacking the longest-serving independent senator from Vermont, in an attempt to attack him, have said, "Oh, look, 12% of the people that supported Senator Sanders ended up voting for Donald Trump." Well, that's true. And instead of saying shame on the voters, we could perhaps say, yay, Senator Sanders, for appealing to 12% of the Donald Trump elect. In other words, let's not shame the voters in suggesting that it's suddenly the voters' fault that they veered from the left to the right. You can't shame the voters. It's the candidate's job to appeal to the voters, and the voters vote based upon the message, communicated by said candidates. Now, when you suggest, that Senator Sanders, that 12% of his supporters went to Donald Trump, supported him over who? Hillary Clinton? Yes. Okay. Well, in that case, then all of a sudden we're talking about the duopoly and the lesser evilism, et cetera, et cetera. And some decided not to vote at all, or 47% of the electorate, 47% of eligible voters decided not to vote in the 2016 election. But the ideas that Senator Sanders had were ideas that can reach across the board. It's not shame on the voters for deciding to vote for Donald Trump, or shame on those 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters for deciding to support Donald Trump. If 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters who supported him in the primary decided to support Donald Trump in the general election, perhaps it's because Bernie Sanders had a message that resonated with people across the ideological spectrum. And engaging in voter shaming is not going to get the Democratic Party anywhere, particularly in 2020, etc. But when we talk about those issues, that why did Bernie Sanders' message resonate across the board? It's issues that resonate across the board on issues such as overturning Citizens United, removing corporate money from our political process. That's not left or right. Removing corporate cash from our political process is an issue that resonates across the board, left or right. No one wants to see Walmart, Amazon, Goldman Sachs, etc., purchasing political candidates. No one wants to be represented by candidates who do not represent them. No one wants to be represented by a politician who, in fact, considers Goldman Sachs their constituency. Reining in Wall Street, breaking up the big banks, etc., etc. Do you think you're going to reach that same constituency or get that same reach across the board message when it comes to Elizabeth Warren or Beto O'Rourke or Cory Booker or Kamala Harris, etc., etc., etc.? No, you're not. Not for a brief second. And they like to say, well, he's not a Democrat. No, he's not. And thank God he's not. At any rate, New York Magazine put out an article entitled, and I quote, "Bernie Sanders and the Lies We Tell White Voters." This article propagates the myth that Senator Sanders lacks support among minorities. Now, and the facts of the matter, that Senator Sanders actually garners the support of 76% of the minority vote. Minority across the board. We're speaking of indigenous peoples, black and brown communities, etc. He garners 76% of that minority vote. That's fact. So New York Magazine, again, is doing what we refer to as gaslighting the American people into believing that fact is fiction and that one thing is another, and it's because of a bubble that they have lived in, that they have writ within, the facts that they take to a fact when a presumption when they look at information, that they take presumptions to that information before they write this article. At any rate, in Politico, finally, writes an article entitled, and I quote, "Bernie 2016 alumni wary of a 2020 sequel." And this is also a quote, and I quote, "Bernie Sanders has a problem as he decides whether to run in 2020. Many of his former staffers are looking elsewhere." His staffers. Where will he ever find staffers? Bernie Sanders' staffers are looking elsewhere. In other words, the individuals that he supported, that he hired, the staffers, this is their job, they're staffers. They're hired in the realm of politics. That where are we going to find staffers? We'll hire more staffers. Perhaps these are the people that they polled when they suggested that Joe Biden, The Hill wrote an article. In an article by The Hill, they suggested that Joe effing Biden is more popular among progressives than Bernie Sanders is. The Hill wrote that article. You can look it up. Do a Google search. Matter of fact, I can include that in the description box as well, just for the hell of it. However, who is a progressive, according to The Hill, to suggest that Joe Biden is more popular among progressives? Joe Biden, Barack Obama's VP, for those who don't know, is more popular among progressives than is Senator Sanders. LOL. But the mainstream media continues to gaslight the body politic, and for a reason. Bernie Sanders has not even announced his candidacy yet, and the mainstream media is already shitting a brick. They're quite scared indeed, and they have reason to be because their donors, many members of Congress own stocks in Comcast. Comcast owns MSNBC, and this is one particular point I will continue to nail home, is the fact that members of Congress own stocks in Comcast. Comcast owns MSNBC. MSNBC showers those candidates up for re-election with positive, flowery coverage. CNN, owned by Turner Broadcasting Group. Turner Broadcasting donates to candidates. Those candidates are showered with glowing, flowery coverage from CNN, etc., etc. This is how corruption works. And oftentimes, like Nancy Pelosi owns a stock in Comcast. That's a fact. Look it up. OpenSecrets.org, supported by the Center for Responsive Politics. That's how corruption works, and that's how incumbents are supported. That is the definition of corruption. You have media supporting candidates whose parent corporations are supporting said candidates. Those same candidates support ideals that promote the best interest of those parent companies, etc. So be it not far from you that you could consider yourself gaslighted when you read an article by The Hill or Politico or MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, etc., Politico, etc., when you read an article suggesting that Bernie Sanders is anything other than the most popular politician in the United States, which a Harvard-Harris poll revealed that Bernie Sanders is the single most popular politician in the United States. Why? Because 76% of the American population support Medicare for all. Because 65% of the American population support breaking up the big banks. His politics are popular. The American people want better. The working class, which has recently become the working poor, not so much recently, but in the last 20 to 25 years, Reaganomics, neoliberalism, etc. And we're supposed to be gaslighted in believing that we are absolutely crazy in thinking that a politician that supports the ideals that will better the American public are just unpopular or unwinnable against a Donald Trump. And we have seen in 2016, we saw what ideas were unwinnable against Donald Trump. Centrist, neoliberal, corporate-friendly politics. Do not be gaslighted. And please, by all means, continue to fight even harder in 2020. Again, my name is Devin Jones, and this has been the Sparks Tribune Report. Fight harder.